and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick with the City of Hampton. And today we're going to talk to you about the city budget, but not so much numbers, but how you can get involved and tell us what is important to you. My guest is Assistant City Manager Brian DeProfio. Welcome back.
Hello, thank you. How are you doing today?
Good.
That's good.
You are a wonderful numbers person, and that is your background. And I think budget is a scary term for most of the rest of us. But the budget is about where you place your priorities and how much you want to spend on a service versus another service. So how do we in Hampton, because I think honestly we do it better than anyone in the region and possibly among the best in the country, how do we explain that to people and get them involved and excited about this?
Well, one of the things that we started, probably about 10 years ago was the I Value campaign. And through that process, what we do is we go out to the community, and before we release the budget, and that's one of the key differences, before we release the budget, we try to get input from the community on what their priorities are. And that's been very beneficial. When the manager puts her budget out, which is generally around April 15th, that's the deadline, we've incorporated all of that information that we've gotten from the public at that time. And we do it with in-person meetings where people can come and interact with the city manager and other key city staff and ask questions about what things, what things are about and any questions that they have about the budget. And we also do it through online to give people great convenience to be able to participate in the process. So we take all that information and we try to build a budget with that in mind. And
Hampton actually has won multiple national and international award, I think, for this as well. But explain to us how that's different than what other communities do. Because other communities, you have public hearings, which actually we still have. Mm-hmm. But at what stage of the game does their input happen, and how extensive is it usually?
I think pretty much everybody else does it at the public hearings, and the process that takes is you release the budget and then you get people's input through the public hearing process in front of council. So it really doesn't give you very much time, it doesn't give council very much time to incorporate that feedback in the budget. And so by us doing it on the front end, we can give council a product that really is reflective of the feedback that we've gotten from the community.
Because I think the hard thing is, if 10 people show up at a public hearing and complain about something in the budget, it probably gets changed. Mm-hmm. Because councils everywhere react to public feedback, but that doesn't really say, well, what did 1,000 people feel about it? And then that change bumps somebody else's priority, and maybe they can come to a public hearing, maybe it's too late, and so those things aren't fully vetted.
Yeah, that's another great point. I mean, by doing it before the process and having the online, as well as when we do our meetings, we'll do some in the evening, we'll do at least one on the weekend, so that we can try to catch people when they have availability to be able to participate in the process. And so we do get typically 1,000 or more people who participate in the process. So we get a larger cross-section of the people than the folks who typically come to the council meetings and participate in the public hearings.
And I think, you hear this on a federal level, special interests. Well, special interests are just people, but the question is, I think, how many people feel that way? Because if one neighborhood shows up loudly, that's important, but you've got to hear from all the other neighborhoods as well. And I think that's sort of the balance that we try to get to.
Yeah. Hey.
So what kinds of questions do we ask people? I mean, I've looked at a lot of budget input because I'm involved also, and I'm asking you questions I know the answers to. But a lot of times it's this sort of budget game that you can play. And so you go online and you say, I want this much to be spent on this service, and you drag the needle down for another. But it's this isolated exercise. It doesn't say what happens if I cut the money for parks. How would I cut the money for parks? You can have that input which says parks are more important than libraries or whatever your input is, but it's not translated to what services would change, how that would affect people's lives.
Yeah. What we try to do is we try to ask them questions that basically have, where they can understand and appreciate the impacts. Last year, one of the things that we really focused on was our strategic initiative projects. We said, okay, which ones of these do you think are the most important to you? We also asked questions around changes to EMS fees, and in the past, we've also asked questions around changes in tax rate, as well as changes in some of our other fees, like our solid waste fee and that sort of thing. And through that process, we try to give them a sense of really what does this mean? You know, what the projects are about, what the impact on services would be, and that way they can make as informed decisions as possible. And that's the key process. And this year, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to kind of rewind a little bit and ask many of the same questions that we asked when we first started this process. And because we've kind of gone through and we've taken the input. It's been, I think, around 8-9 years since we got the input, and we're going to say, okay, here's how we have used the input, and so you can kind of see how it's impacted our budget over the course of time. Do you still feel the way that you felt 8 years ago? You know, of course, we've had some turnover in the community. There's some new people. It gives new people an opportunity to participate, as well as priorities change over time. So we want to continue to keep our finger on the pulse of what the community's priorities are and what their needs are, so that we can go ahead and fashion a budget that's reflective of those.
So we're going to show people roughly what would have happened without public input. So suppose we took the FY10 budget, which was before this started, and increased it each year at the amount of inflation. We're going to find that we've cut internal services relatively by X% compared to what they would have been. And we've increased spending relative to what inflationary dollars are in public service. And so ask people, are we at the right levels? Should we continue to invest in this service? Should we hold steady in this service? Should we decrease or eliminate? Because, those are all possibilities. We've changed a lot, and we're going to go back and ask some of those same questions again and say, so now how do you feel? Now are we at the right levels?
Yeah, and one of the key things that has floated up as a priority during this period of time has been public safety, as you've mentioned. And so we have continued to make investments in public safety. We've added firefighters, we've added police officers, we've added technology, we added a new fire station to increase response times. And so we've had a lot of activity taking place and a lot of investment taking place on the public safety side during this period of time, where really, we've had really low revenue growth due to the economy. So, we want to go back and say, okay, here's what we've done. We've listened to you, and here's how it's worked out. Do you still feel the same way? We should be continuing to make the investments that we have been making in these key areas, or do you think it's time to sort of try to pay closer attention or reinvest in some areas that we haven't been as aggressive in investing in over the last few years?
And I think, that's an important conversation. And what has happened is we're through the recession. I mean, our revenues are not declining anymore, but they're really not growing at the rate of inflation. And so if we're growing some services at a higher rate, either the revenue picture has to change or we have to shrink some other services. And it's not an easy choice. I mean, if you're Congress, you get to say, let's take on some more debt and do everything. But if you're the city of Hampton, legally, not that we would want to, but you can't do that. We have to balance every year.
Right, and we're subject to the various pressures. For example, I had a conversation with the director of fleet services that manages our fleet of vehicles, and he was talking about, fuel prices are up 30 cents over where they were last year. Last year, I think they were about $2. Now they're at about $2.30.
Yeah, it was great when the gas costs were low. It was good for the economy. It was good for workers. It was great for the city. And now we're going to have to face that that's not the case.
Yeah, and so, and we have to fuel our police vehicles, we have to fuel our solid waste vehicles, we have to, fuel our fire trucks and ambulances. And so
they're big vehicles. They use some, their gas mileage is not what my Prius gets. Yeah. It's a big impact.
Yeah, so that's one of the pressures that we're dealing with, like everybody else, when we go and try to put our budget together, just to sort of give one example.
And we participate in some regional services where I think Hampton has less control over what happens because we're part of a regional consortium, and we don't get to set what our contribution is entirely. It's a more complicated process than that.
Yeah, that's correct. And sometimes they have pressures on their budgets. For example, the regional jail has pressures on health care for inmates. And it's just our inmate population is getting older and they're getting sicker. And so there's, that's driving up some of the healthcare costs for the regional jail. And all the communities that participate in that project, which includes Newport News, Norfolk, Portsmouth, Chesapeake, and Hampton, all, are having to really make some adjustments to take that into consideration and the pressures that they're dealing with as well. So, it's always a balancing act. You have things that you have to do.
And sometimes those aren't the things I would choose as a citizen. But, you've got legal mandates. You've got to do certain things. One of the things that always comes up is that individuals would maybe like to cut some of the social programs, but some of those are mandated and primarily funded by the state and federal government. And if you don't do it, you lose those dollars too. So you're really not saving the city of Hampton taxpayers any money.
That's correct.
So there's a real push and pull here, but we still want to hear from people. And it doesn't, because you don't know those things doesn't mean you can't have input. In the in-person sessions, which are going to be Tuesday, the 20th at 6:30, and Saturday, the 26th, is that what that
24th.
is? At 9 a.m. So we're really trying to bring people out at different times. Mary will give you the ground rules and explain, last year I remember a lot of people thought the federal government contributed a decent amount to our budget, and it is way less than 1%,
right.
Way less. Right. And those are probably grants that are going to go away or they're temporary. So, people can understand and learn a little bit before they punch their keypads. But if you can't make that hour-and-a-half to 2-hour commitment, there'll be a chat in the evening on that Thursday where you can stay at home and ask the same kind of questions. There'll be an online polling option, which you can do at your convenience. That's usually up for about 2 weeks. We really want people to have a say. And I think, Mary sort of telegraphed she's not thinking about recommending a tax rate increase this year, but I think those questions are going to come back in terms of people have to either we have to grow revenue or we have to cut from the level we are because we're not keeping up with inflation. And we just have to make that choice. And by we, I don't mean you and me in city government. I mean the people who fund city government and benefit from what the services are and use the services. It's not ezy.
No.
If we could punt that, it would make life a whole lot easier. But it's not the responsible way to go.
Right.
So in summary, you want people to come out and help us do the best job we can with this recommendation that the city manager is going to make.
Yeah, this is the opportunity to have an input on the budget as we develop it. So that we can, work through the priorities that the community gives us and try to put something before council that really is reflective of those. So we encourage everybody to come out and participate so that we can know sort of what's important to you and we can go and try to deliver that when we do the budget.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching. I do hope to see you at one of the in-person events. It is truly the best way to learn. And as you are voting for the services on the keypad that you support, the results are immediate. And you can see, hey, maybe not everybody in the room feels the same way. Or, wow, this is an overwhelming amount of support. And it's an educational experience. And it's also a lot of fun because you're not doing it at home in isolation. But if that works better for you, please take the survey at home. Be involved, speak out. We want to hear from you. Thanks for watching.